Good evening, I'm Andre Hepkins. Tonight, WBAL TV 11 and WBAL News Radio are proud to partner with Maryland Public Television for a debate featuring the top Democratic candidates for Maryland governor. You can find a complete voter's guide with information on all of the candidates on our website and mobile app. Enjoy the debate.
This program is made by MPT to enrich the diverse communities throughout our state and is made possible by the generous support of our members. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone, to the Maryland Democratic primary gubernatorial debate. I'm Jeff Salkin. We are joined in the studio by 8 candidates for the Democratic nomination for governor. In random order, they are Peter Franchot, Ashwani Jain, John King, Tom Perez, John Barron, Doug Gansler, Wes Moore, and Rushern Baker. Questions will come from a panel of 3 journalists: Deborah Weiner, news anchor, WBAL TV; Clarence Mitchell IV, C4, the morning show host on WBAL AM; and Alexis Taylor, news editor of the Afro-American newspapers. Thank you all for being with us. The candidates will each get 60 seconds to respond to each question. And the first question comes from Deborah Weiner.
Hello, and nice to see everyone here. Each of you seeks to succeed a 2-term Republican governor who has garnered widespread support in Maryland with at times a 65% approval rating. Given Governor Hogan's success, how do you argue for change? What are those changes that are necessary? And what makes you more qualified than everyone else in this room to lead the state?
We'll go down the line on this one, beginning with Mr. Franchot.
Thank you, Deborah, for that question. And for the last 16 years, I've been the comptroller of the state of Maryland. People come up to me all the time and tug at my sleeve and say, "You've been a great comptroller, you'll make a great governor." And I think they're referring to the 3 R's in our agency. We respect the taxpayer, we respond to the taxpayer, we get results for the taxpayer. I intend to take those 3 R's to state government in every agency. That will allow us to have the trust and confidence to do some major things. 100,000 new family-supporting jobs in the first 100 weeks. Attracting 100,000 young adults to Maryland by saying, come and live and work and pay taxes for 5 years in Maryland, we'll forgive your student loan. Going to the healthcare system and saying we need to improve the affordability and accessibility by a whole series of community clinics. Motivating kids that are in the K-12 school system and then providing home ownership. Thank you. I'm enjoying being here. That was the fastest minute I've ever seen. But that's good. I'm glad we're all here on time. Thank you.
Mr. Jain, a fast minute.
Yeah, my name is Ashwani Jain. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm running for governor to make politics inclusive and accessible. So here are 4 reasons to vote for me. Number 1, while I would be the nation's youngest governor, I have the experience working in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors, the Obama White House, and 2 federal agencies. Number 2, I'm fully accessible, being the only governor candidate who spends 90% of my time meeting voters at their homes in a different county every day of the week. Number 3, I'm fully accountable, being the first statewide campaign in the United States that is 100% run by residents from every age, background, and county. And number 4, I am fully transparent, having shared the most comprehensive and fully paid for policy agenda a year and a half ago in January of 2021 on my website, jainforgovernor.com. Because I'm not just trying to win this election, I'm trying to change our politics for generations to come. Thank you.
Next is Mr. King.
It took my family 3 generations to travel 25 miles from enslaved in a cabin in Gaithersburg to serving in the cabinet of the first Black president. I'm standing here today because my ancestors lived with faith in a future they could not see. As a teacher, principal, and Secretary of Education for President Obama, I've dedicated my life to public service. I'm running for governor because I have faith that in the wealthiest state in the country, we can build a more just and prosperous future together. You'll hear real differences tonight because too many on this stage are trapped in an era where the measure of success is years as an insider or Annapolis endorsements. I believe success is truly funding world-class schools and universal childcare by making multimillionaires and big corporations pay their fair share. Success is taking bold action on climate. Success is rejecting the dog whistle politics of the past and delivering public safety while ending Maryland's shame as the highest incarcerating state for young black men. Government can and must be a force for good in people's lives.
Tom Perez.
I'm Tom Perez, and I'm running for governor to make sure that we have jobs, justice, and opportunity across Maryland. I'm part of the GSD wing of the Democratic Party. I want to get stuff done, and that's exactly what I've done throughout my career. As a federal prosecutor, I took on hate crimes and police misconduct. As the first Latino on the Montgomery County Council, we took on prescription drugs and built world-class schools. As the head of the Civil Rights Division at the Justice Department, we took on predatory lenders. We protected reproductive health clinics. We did so much more. And as your labor secretary, U.S. Labor Secretary, we made sure we brought jobs to everyone. We made sure we expanded opportunity for everyone. That's what I have done. Now, if you want to figure out what someone's going to do in the future, look at what they've done in the past. That's exactly what the Washington Post did when they reviewed everyone and they endorsed our campaign. I'm so proud to have that endorsement. They said that none of the other candidates could match my track record for or command of governing. I look forward to this debate. I'm honored to have the support of so many unions and others, and I thank you for allowing us this time tonight.
Mr. Barron.
I'm a former nonprofit executive and Clinton administration official. The reason I'm running for governor is that Maryland isn't making progress on major problems damaging millions of lives, and I'm offering a fundamentally different approach than the other candidates. In education, more than a quarter of middle school students in our state can't read at a basic level. Those numbers are no different than they were 20 years ago. Moderate income Marylanders have seen stagnant wages since the 1980s, as income inequality has soared, and our state has made no progress reducing our poverty rate in more than 30 years. Fellow Marylanders, we can't just keep doing the same thing we've been doing for decades, rolling out one unproven government program after another and expect a different result, because unfortunately many programs don't work. Instead, to make progress, we need to expand solutions that don't just sound like they're good ideas, but have actually been tested in the real world and shown to make a major difference in people's lives, and I'll be discussing examples today. Thank you.
Doug Gansler.
This election is about crime and criminal justice. I spent 6 years as a federal prosecutor. I spent 8 years as the state's attorney of Montgomery County, and I spent 8 years as your elected attorney general. I've been fighting criminals and gun crimes for 22 years. I recognize that we need to bring crime down while lifting justice up, and I recognize that crime occurs in disproportionately underserved areas and communities of color. There's no other candidate in this debate that has any background whatsoever in criminal justice. Think about that. The most important issue in people's minds right now is crime and criminal justice, and nobody here has any background in that whatsoever. So what we're going to do as the only pro-business, pro-law enforcement candidate in this field is we're going to put 1,000 more police officers on the streets, trained in de-escalation techniques. We're going to put an SRO in every school so your children are safe when you take them to school. And as the only candidate, a major candidate who grew up in Maryland, I want to help you make Maryland safe again.
Wes Moore.
Right now in Maryland, families are worried about rising costs, how our kids are finishing the school year, and feeling unsafe, both in our communities and also in our own skin. And I don't just see these challenges, I have lived them. I watched my father die in front of me when I was 3 after he didn't get the health care that he needed. My mother, an immigrant from Jamaica, didn't get her first job that gave her benefits until I was 14 years old. And these are some of the same challenges that people on this stage have had 30 years to fix. I will tackle these problems with a sense of urgency that no one else can or will. I've led soldiers in combat in Afghanistan. I've built a successful small business here in Maryland. I've served as CEO of one of the nation's largest poverty-fighting organizations, and I'll put my preparedness to lead in this moment against anybody else. We need to come together with new leadership, vision, and experience and build a state where we will leave no one behind.
Rashawn Baker.
We are at a seminal moment in history right now. The world has completely shifted during COVID-19. Many folks feel frustrated because they believe that it's Their voices are not being heard. What they get from politicians is business as usual. I know that Nancy Navarro and I can meet this challenge and lead our state into the new reality. But in order to do that, it takes talking truth to power. It takes transparency, accountability, and telling hard truths to get it done. Over 2,000 mostly black young men in Baltimore City were slaughtered over the last 8 years. And let's be honest, nobody says anything, nobody gives a damn because they're black. What we want to do is we've got to change that. This is a public safety crisis. It's an economic crisis. It's a moral crisis. It affects not only Baltimore City, but the entire state. And it has to end. As governor, I will stake my administration's claim on stopping the slaughter in Baltimore City.
Mr. Baker, thank you very much. In the interest of fairness, we will re-randomize the order of responses for every round of questions. The second question comes from C4. Senator.
Hello, all. As we join each other, over the past weekend, Baltimore City saw 4 more homicides to add to the gruesome numbers that one of the candidates just expressed in Baltimore City. But also, we have averaged 700 non-fatal shootings over the last 7 years. Thank God for our hospitals and the healthcare facilities that we have had to keep those lives alive. I've talked to many of you, and you have talked about parole and probation being one of the major functions, if you're the next governor, that you will use to assist Baltimore City in trying to fight crime. But you also will be responsible for appointing judges. One of the concerns we have in the city, many do, is that our judicial community, while trying to be just and fair, is not elevating public safety to the point that they should. How will you select judges in the future, and how can you help Baltimore City in that role?
We'll start with Mr. Jain.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really important question, and it's just really sickening and saddening to see what's happening. So to the first part of the question, in terms of how we would make appointments, I would use the experiences I had working in the Obama White House and administration, helping recruiting, managing, and appointing and retaining the political appointees in the federal government, making sure those folks have accountability, are transparent, and have the same lived experiences of our communities. And then more broadly speaking, we have to look at the entire criminal justice system in a comprehensive way. That means doing everything from ending extreme sentences for children, ending the money bail system, continuing the end of for-profit prison contracts, making sure we legalize marijuana while expunging records, making sure we decriminalize scheduled drugs, and instead of sending you to jail, send you to a local and fully funded rehab center, making sure we're addressing actual housing concerns, making sure that folks have access to good jobs and a reduced cost of living, free public transit, preparing those who are in prison for life outside of prison by having workforce development programs. All these issues can be done, but we cannot put Band-Aids or just look at short-term solutions to a long-term problem.
Mr. Barron.
Thank you. So my approach is different than the other candidates here because I would focus on public safety solutions that have been tested and shown to make a major difference elsewhere and bring them to our state. It involves a partnership between judges, law enforcement, and police, and social services. There's an approach called focused deterrence, which recognizes that the majority of violent crime in a city like Baltimore is carried out by a relatively small number of individuals who are repeat violent offenders. This approach invites them in for meetings with social service agencies, community leaders, and law enforcement, and offers them a positive way forward with job opportunities and so on, but also makes clear that if they continue to act violently, they'll be the focus of extraordinary attention from law enforcement. When tested in other cities, this has been shown to reduce the homicide rate by as much as 50%. We should do tested and proven strategies like this to bring the crime rate down in Baltimore and elsewhere.
Mr. Perez.
This is a critically important issue. And as a former federal prosecutor, this is an issue I've worked on. Contrary to what my good friend Doug Gansler says, he's not the only one who's had criminal justice experience. I was a prosecutor for a number of years at the Justice Department, and we worked in collaboration on issues exactly like this. And as it relates to your question, C4, about the court system, there are many ways we can do this. Community involvement in the selection of judges, having drug courts, having veterans courts, having other ideas where we understand that, you know what, we have to be smart on crime. What I would do as governor is unbelievable partnership with the city of Baltimore. We need a governor who's a partner, not an adversary of the city of Baltimore. We need to make sure that we are correcting the issues in parole and probation. We need to make sure that we understand that there are 40,000 warrants that have been served, but they're outstanding. This will require unprecedented attention to detail. The next governor needs to understand how to govern, and these are issues I've worked on in the police context and elsewhere.
Mr. Franchot.
Yes, thank you. All over the state where I travel, I say if we don't have any public safety or a concept of public safety, we can't have a flourishing economy. We've got to deal with not only the hot spots in Baltimore City, but also the hot spots around the state. I have zero tolerance, obviously, for police misconduct as an Army veteran. That I expect everybody to be professional. But I also have zero tolerance for any kind of repeat violent offenders. And so I think we need to have a sustained effort of bringing our elite law enforcement into hotspots and making sure that we arrest the open warranted repeat violent offenders, take them off the street, and then to C4's question about judges, making sure they stay off the street. I think we can do that. I haven't heard a mention of community policing. We need to have community policing again in Maryland. People know who their officer is on the beat. Thank you very much, and it's always a pleasure to be here.
Next to Mr. King.
As a teacher and principal, I've lost students to gun violence when they were just trying to get back and forth to school. The tired talking points of the last 30 years and racist dog whistles are not keeping us safe, and they're not keeping our kids safe. We need policymakers and judges who understand that to achieve public safety, we need not only police and the criminal justice system, but a comprehensive understanding that realizes that we can't just send in more police as the solution. Baltimore already has one of the highest per capita police per citizen rates in the country. We need policing plus violence intervention programs. We need policing plus mental health services and addiction treatment. We need policing plus rec centers and summer jobs for teens and apprenticeship programs that unlock economic opportunity. We need policing plus reentry programs for those who are incarcerated, like Second Chance Pell, which I led on as Secretary of Education for President Obama. We need policing plus stronger gun laws. We need an approach that gives real hope for public safety.
Mr. Moore.
One of the most important responsibilities of the governor is going to be appointing judges. But we also have to understand that while judges are enforcing the laws, there are laws that still need to be strengthened. And we have to come up with better community partnerships to be able to deal with the issue of public safety and violent crime. Just a few months back, I spoke at the vigil of a 69-year-old grandmother who was a custodian in my church, who was killed in the church bathroom. When we think about what we need right now, we need to be able to address this issue with a sense of urgency. Over the past 7 years, we have lost 300 plus people in Baltimore alone because of violence. And that means we have to tackle getting illegal guns off of our streets. It means, as you correctly stated, C4, we have to fix parole and probation, because a third of all people who are committing violent crimes are in violation of parole and probation. But it also means we're not going to arrest nor militarize our way out of this. We have to deal with the root causes of crime and deal with them now.
Mr. Gansler and then Mr. Baker.
In terms of judges, currently the Chief Judge of the Court of Appeals of Maryland and the Chief Judge of the Court of Special Appeals of Maryland worked in my office. I hired both of them. We need to have the best and brightest and smartest judges. Judges understand that a woman has absolute right to reproductive choice, that the climate change is a real threat, but most importantly, that crime is ravaging us. It's holding Maryland back from its future. I argue in front of the United States Supreme Court. I won a unanimous decision keeping a sex offender in jail in Western Maryland. I ran the Joint Sniper Task Force, the Beltway Snipers, and we brought them to justice. I started the first domestic violence dockets, the first drug courts, the first family justice center in Maryland's history. We'll be bringing those to around the state. I started the first community prosecution office in the United States, fully community prosecution, to work with the community police. Crime is holding us back. We need someone that understands how to fix this. It's not summer camp or worrying about parole agents.
Mr. Baker.
You know, this is not an academic question for me. I actually had to deal with this issue for 8 years in Prince George's County, one of the largest jurisdictions. So when we talk about the role of judges in this, it means you bring everything together. The reason I say that we need a state of emergency in Baltimore City is because we have to open up all the tools we have at our disposal. Yes, meeting with judges. Yes, meeting with our mental health facilities. Yes, meeting with our police department, but also having the state come in and help. Some of that parole and probation is at the state level. The governor controls that. They need to help. That more prosecutors. The governor needs to help, but also opening up those mental health facilities, opening up job opportunities. This is what we did in the county to reduce crime by 50% over 8 years, not have it go up one day and down the next, but consistently. But you have to bring the judges in there. You have to talk with the prosecutors. You have to use the power of your office to actually get it done. That's what the governor needs to do. As governor, I will do that.
Next question from Alexis Taylor.
Thank you. As a former Baltimore City public school system teacher, I can attest to the state of schools prior to the pandemic. Teachers were in classrooms drowning by themselves with 38+ students. Students couldn't use the water fountains in the building, and the air conditioning is still a problem. Just last week, we sent students home in Baltimore City early. We sent them home early because there was no air conditioning in some of our schools. And then the pandemic hit. I can tell you that in March of 2020, I was working at 2 different elementary schools. Neither school had a full custodial staff. Neither school could keep soap in the bathrooms for teachers and students. All of these issues have been exacerbated due to COVID. How will you help these students and these teachers and the faculty move through this pandemic? Just last week, Baltimore County Public School Administrator told the Afro-American newspapers, yeah, they have opened schools, but they can't even get to the part of the curriculum that explains redistricting. They can't get to the part of the curriculum that talks about voting rights and elections because it's a revolving door with the staff having COVID, with the students continuing to get COVID. How will you navigate our schools through this pandemic as it continues and the numbers rise?
This round starts with Wes Moore.
You know, there are 2 things that saved me. One was a mother who just wouldn't quit. And the other was an education that helped me to understand that the world was bigger than what was directly in front of me. That's what saved me. And our obligation is to ensure that we are providing the same type of pathways for all of our children. You know, I was proud of the fact that I was able to work on the blueprint. I was proud to testify on behalf of the blueprint. And in my administration, I will make sure that the blueprint is fully funded, and we'll work in partnership with our educators and local elected officials to ensure that it is properly implemented. And I'm proud of the fact that I received the support of Maryland teachers, received Maryland teachers' endorsement. Because right now, we have got to focus and stress on equity to ensure that we are doing things like having pre-K for every child in need, to focus and invest in apprenticeship programs and trade programs to give students a proper pathway to economic growth and success, and focus on mental and behavioral health both for students and also for our educators and our paraeducators.
Mr. Gansler.
12 years ago, I started Charm City Youth Lacrosse to help Baltimore City students achieve success outside of the classroom. But inside of the classroom is even more important. And these kids, I can tell you story after story about how these kids have been deprived and left behind. These kids show up in kindergarten and they're already so far behind they can never breach that gap or bridge that gap. We need to have universal pre-K. We need to have universal child care. We need to make sure our schools are safe with school resource officers, but also making sure we identify gangs and take down the gangs that are scaring them. We need to have a mental health professional for every 250 students in our schools. We need to pay our teachers appropriately and not have them teach to a standardized test, but teach so the children want to learn and can learn. We need to have vocational training available to students, literacy training available to students. We need to make sure every student has broadband access in Baltimore City and in rural areas. Rhetoric does not make a record. I've gotten things done. I've done it before. I'll do it again.
Comptroller Francho.
Yes, thank you very much. And it's outrageous that I think it was 12,000 kids had to go home last week because of overheating. This issue has been around for a dozen years. The governor and I worked on one solution. The city is doing its best to try to bring these schools up to date, but I apologize on behalf of the state of Maryland for the physical condition of these schools. I have a different, I support the Kirwan plan. I'm going to implement it, but we're going to do things like putting the money into where the kids and the teachers can actually benefit from it, not just the infrastructure, but also liberating the teachers from standardized testing and these huge classrooms that were mentioned, and liberating the students by motivating them with experiential learning curriculums. Those things will really make a difference, along with the infrastructure changes. I'm committed to doing it and working with the leadership in Baltimore City and Baltimore County to rectify these problems. They will improve.
Ashwani Jain.
So I'm a proud product of Maryland Public Schools. I also went to a Title I elementary school in Wheaton that had mold on the ceilings, overcrowded with students, great educators who just didn't have the resources they needed. Years later, when I was in middle school fighting for cancer and trying to overcome that, it was the entire ecosystem of that school that made me feel supported. So that's why in our education platform found at janeforgovernor.com, we talk about the entire system in an organized, comprehensive way. That means universal pre-K. That means diversifying our educator pool, making sure we have affordable housing, making sure we have free and more available public transit, making sure that we move away from standardized testing to more performance-based testing, making sure we expand and have universal broadband access. We have universal and comprehensive sex ed in our public health classes that teach about reproductive justice and gender identity, making sure we remove SROs from our public schools and replace them with more mental health professionals so we get to the root causes of these issues, making sure we require financial literacy to graduate high school and have accountability when it comes to the budget, so regardless of what zip code you live in, you have the resources you need.
John King.
I'll be the education governor not just because I was a teacher and principal, not just because I was President Obama's Secretary of Education, not just because I'm the only one standing here who has a kid currently in a Maryland public school, but because I wouldn't be standing here but for the grace of public education. When I was a kid, both my parents were educators. They both passed away when I was little. My mom when I was 8, my dad when I was 12. In the period when it was just my dad and me, my dad was struggling with Alzheimer's. Home was incredibly difficult, so difficult that I struggled in high school and actually got kicked out of high school. The thing that saved me, public school educators. And so we have to deliver in Maryland that same educational opportunity for all of our kids, regardless of community. Of course, we should fully fund the blueprint for Maryland's future, but that should be the floor and not the ceiling. We have to commit to the investment necessary, and that means making sure that multimillionaires and large corporations pay their fair share. That means having a governor who understands that we need to build on the K-12 system with universal affordable child care.
Mr. Barron.
The pandemic only exacerbated pre-existing problems, long-standing educational problems in our state. More than a quarter of middle school students in Maryland can't read at a basic level. More than a third can't do basic math. Those numbers are no different than 20 years ago. 25% of students in Baltimore don't graduate from high school. We are just perpetuating a cycle of poverty. This is true. There's been no progress, even though Maryland saw a major rise in education spending during the 2000s, about a 40% rise in spending per pupil adjusted for inflation. This time, and the reason that didn't work is because many programs, no matter how well-meaning, they just don't improve student outcomes. This time we have to focus on solutions that are tested and proven. My top priority as governor, we would provide high-quality tutoring to every struggling first and second grader in the entire state of Maryland, because that's been shown to move them toward grade level early before their problems get serious. We will do this by recruiting an army of people from the community, including retirees and recent college graduates, to provide that tutoring.
Tom Perez.
Education is indeed the great equalizer. It was the great equalizer for me. I was 12 years old when my dad died suddenly of a heart attack. And thank God for great education and Pell Grants and all those things. I'm a proud public school parent. And you know what? I also believe, and I've always lived by this belief, that budgets are moral documents. They reflect the views of an individual and the values of a community. And when someone tells you they support something, you should ask them, where is it in your budget? And this is an example of an issue where, and I said before in my opening, if you want to figure out what someone's going to do in the future, look at what they've done in the past. My friend Peter Francho says now that he supports the Kirwan Blueprint. That's not what he said during the deliberations, and that's not what his actions showed. We need someone who will make sure we implement this blueprint, and the next governor is going to have to be the implementer in chief, because education at its core and its focus from cradle through career, this is how we will again get back to #1. We used to be #1 in public education. We have fallen behind.
Mr.
We can catch up.
Mr. Baker.
You know, all 3 of my children went to our public schools in Prince George's County. And our middle child was struggling, and I wanted to move her out. I was a delegate at the time, move her out of our school. And my wife said no. She said if every politician had their children in public schools, in those challenging schools, you'd have a sense of urgency to fix it. That is what we need. The blueprint is great, but we knew 20 years ago with the Thornton Commission we were underfunding our schools. And now with COVID, it has changed everything. Parents are afraid to send their kids to school. They're afraid to put them on the bus. Their teachers are afraid. So we've got to put more than that. The governor has 2 responsibilities that are major. One is the budget, the other is public education. So I want to use, as the only person who's been an executive here, to use the power of the governor's office to work with the local jurisdictions to not only put the funding in there, but to open up the other avenues like healthcare and mental and behavioral health, those things that will help our school system move forward. Economic development and transportation.
Next question, back to Deborah Weiner.
My question is about integrity and self-reflection. The public seems to have a growing intolerance for actions and issues that raise alarms about personal integrity. Certainly no one is perfect. How would you characterize your own integrity? And what in your personal or public life would warrant a do-over? And how has that mistake informed you as a leader?
First question this time, or first response, is Mr. King.
You know, when you spend your career as a teacher and principal, there are always things that you'd want to do over, where you'd want to make sure that you gave students every opportunity. But when it comes to public service, I think it's critical that we are always truthful. And we've have to grapple with the reality that too often politicians will inflate their experience. They will say that they're for a thing that they're really against. I'll give you one example. When I was Secretary of Education, I worked to crack down on predatory for-profit colleges that were taking advantage of students, and then to cancel the debt of those students. Candidate Moore was on the board of a predatory for-profit college that was taking advantage of students. If we're serious about public education, then we have to live those values.
Mr. Barron.
So in my campaign, I am not taking a dime of money from political action committees, corporations, or registered Maryland lobbyists, because Maryland deserves a governor who answers to the voters and not to special interests. In addition, when I'm governor and we launch new initiatives like the statewide tutoring corps that I described, we will require a rigorous, independent assessment, the results of which will be reported to the voters and to me as governor and to the General Assembly at the same time, so that everyone will see, did this initiative actually improve educational outcomes or not? People won't have to take my word for it. Now, in terms of mistakes I've made, my career has been devoted to public service, and I regard myself as a person of integrity. I have made mistakes. As a Clinton administration official, I headed a major government program. We implemented a number of reforms. I won awards for reinventing government, but in terms of managing those reforms, I was young. I didn't engage a lot of my colleagues. I could have done a better job in the management at that point.
Secretary Perez.
My parents taught me at a very early age that your integrity is everything. I remember my mother always saying, you can take a lifetime to build a reputation and a moment to tear it down. And I always took that with me. My first job after I finished a federal clerkship was at the Department of Justice. Justice. And I was taught that justice means not convicting anyone at any cost, but justice meant the search for the truth. And I've always tried to live that. Now, here in this campaign, the purpose of a primary is to vet candidates, to make sure that they are battle tested, to make sure we know everything about them. And I encourage you to do your homework. My entire career has been about public service. Yes, I've lost some cases. I wish I could get do-overs on some of those cases that I brought. But you know what? I was always in the fight. And I was always searching to make sure that people who didn't have a fair shake got that fair shake. And so please look carefully at everyone in this case, in this race, because it's really, really important.
Wes Moore.
You know, I first joined the military when I was 17 years old. I actually wasn't even old enough to sign the paperwork. My mother had to sign the paperwork for me, but after my teenage years, she was more than happy to sign whatever paperwork they put in front of her. But I know this is that when I first started, they taught us about the importance of integrity. It's all you have. And I think about the fact that when I volunteered to go back into the military and served with the 82nd Airborne Division in Afghanistan, when I came back and was CEO of one of the largest poverty-fighting organizations in this country, we knew that every single day as an executive, you had to make decisions. Not all of them will be the correct ones, but tomorrow you get up and you make more decisions. And so when we think about what people are requiring, I've been a public servant for my entire life. I just haven't been a politician. But I know as I enter into this space that we will lead with integrity, we will lead with thoughtfulness, and we will do what I always will have done, which is lead with the people.
Mr. Baker.
You know, integrity was the biggest question I faced when I became county executive, because our previous county executive was on his way to federal prison, and a councilwoman was on her way to federal prison. And people had lost confidence in government to do what it needs to do. And so the first immediate challenge I had was bringing that integrity and that confidence back. And the way that I did it was I banned developers from giving money to the county executive or the county council, because I wanted residents to know whatever we do, it's going to be in their best interest. It is why I'm doing public financing. I don't want corporations or special interests to think that they control what we're going to do. People have to have confidence that government is doing it for the right thing, or else they won't buy into it. I know firsthand how important that is. When people ask me what is the greatest accomplishment I've had as an executive, it is the fact that people now in Prince George's County believe in their government, believe that we're going to do the right thing. That's why integrity is so important. As for mistakes, there were times when I was a delegate.
Leaving it there? A cliffhanger.
I've made some choices for political reasons, and I said, nope, never again. I wouldn't do that. That's one of the mistakes I'd like to do over.
Next to Mr. Gansler.
I think trust, integrity, ethics is critical for anybody to have. Rushern Baker and I are the only Democrats in this field, true Democrats. We both served 16 years in in elected office. We're the only two qualified people to run for governor because the Republicans are not going to hold back. They have all the information. If you haven't been vetted before, people need to trust our candidates, and they're not going to hold back going forward. I, for example, led an investigation for the state of Pennsylvania a few years back into an email scandal where we got 5 judges removed and other people removed from their offices in government. We need to make sure that we have somebody who has been vetted, believes in ethics. I mean, for example, when I was confronted with marriage equality, I led the statewide effort to make sure we had marriage equality. It wasn't the politically expedient thing to do, but I did it anyway. And the final thing in terms of what I did wrong or I take back would probably be a deeper appreciation of both of my parents and what they did for me.
Mr. Francho.
Yes, I think the reason I'm up in the polls is because the voters actually know me and trust me and give me the good housekeeping seal of approval as far as integrity. That's 4 statewide races that I've run against Republican competition. And, you know, I have integrity because everybody knows in Annapolis that if you come to Comptroller Francho's office and ask him to do something that will benefit, for example, some political special interest, as Attorney General mentioned, that my answer is going to be, if it's not good for the state of Maryland, I'm not doing it, and I stick to that word. And people understand that, and I think translate that into integrity over the 16 years that I've been comptroller. Great question. Thank you very much.
Lastly, on this, Mr. Jane.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I would say some in the establishment will say that my biggest mistake is running for governor. They say to be governor, you cannot be a 32-year-old. They say you have to be over 40 and elected experience is the only kind of experience that matters. They say that residents should not be running your entire campaign. They say that you have to spend 90% of your time talking to donors and those with connections, and that you have to raise a ton of money. And yet, being someone who's also worked in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors, the Obama White House, 2 federal agencies, running a campaign that's entirely crowdsourced and run by the people of Maryland from every county, and creating one of the largest grassroots campaigns in this state without hosting a single fundraiser and without taking a penny from developers, businesses, PACs, or polluters, I think we have proven that enough is enough, and we have to change the way we have our politics operating, because that's the only way we can actually make progress on all these issues that we keep having the same debates over the same issues with the same people time and time again.
For the next round, the question will go.
Since my name was invoked, is it okay if I?
It was indeed.
Thank you very much. I just want to come back to something that the comptroller said, where he said, people know about the integrity of the comptroller's office, but the reality is that I think what people also understand is that the people who will get Peter Franchot's support oftentimes are those who pay for it. They're oftentimes people who have donated to his campaign. Not once, not twice, but 12 times that has happened, that he has offered a contract to someone who has donated to his campaign. And so the thing, when we're talking about integrity, pay for play is not part of that integrity pledge. And I do think it's important that people understand that as we're talking about what it means to be a person of character and integrity in these public offices.
Mr. Franchot?
Well, look, I have the integrity of my long service in politics that's been totally vetted, and I come back to the fact that the voters have this trust and confidence in me. Yes, I'm a fiscal moderate, a little bit out of touch with everybody up here on the stage. I believe that we need to be fiscally responsible and keep our fiscal house in order. But I'm also socially compassionate. I want to do the right thing. I'm proud of my party, proud of being a Democrat, proud of the values and principles. But I say to people, I'm not a robot, and I'm not going to do exactly what the powerful people in Annapolis want me to do. In fact, I haven't my entire career, neither in the Army where I was or when I came out and worked for public interest groups. I've spent my entire life serving the people. Thank you.
Next question will turn to C4.
In March of this year, as gas prices were beginning to rise, the governor and the state legislature agreed to a 30-day gas tax relief to try to help citizens as we were going through that. The comptroller's office, one of the candidates here, told us that we had $7.5 billion surplus that we could withdraw upon. It would be $100 million to pay for that 30 days. The legislature did not extend that tax. Right up the road in the state of New York, Governor Kathy Hochul, a Democrat, and Democratic legislators have given their citizens gas tax relief from June the 1st through December the 1st. We're about to hit 43 cents with gas tax prices in Maryland come July the 1st. Will any of you, who will ask this legislature to come back for a special session, try to give working families some type of relief from 43 cents a gallon that we're going to be facing come July the 1st?
We'll start with Tom Perez.
I'm going to get to your question in a moment, C4, but I can't help but respond to the last dialogue because that question was about integrity. And I heard my good friend Wes Moore say, I've been a public servant for my entire life. Well, folks, in 2007 to 2012, I was fighting predatory lenders. And during that same time, Wes was working at Citibank. Citibank was one of many banks that were very bad actors in the foreclosure crisis. I took on big banks, and I personally don't know how working at Citibank is public service. I think the public service I did was very important. Now, as to your question, I would do a special session, and here's my North Star. Helping out folks who drive is not enough. My North Star will always be how in this period of inflation do we help the least of us? What if you're transit dependent? We should make buses free. We should come together around a temporary gas tax freeze. But we need to make sure we give help to the least of us. That will be my North Star, C4.
Mr. Perez, thank you. Mr. Moore, you'll have a credit in the rebuttal bank in a moment. We'll go next to Mr. Jane.
Short answer is, of course, we need to extend the gas tax holiday, but we also have to look at reducing costs of living for every Marylander in not only the short term, but the long term as well. We have to look at affordable housing. We have to look at infrastructure. We have to make sure that folks are not struggling paycheck to paycheck or working 2-3 jobs just to make a living. That's why one part of our program is called the Maryland Now Plan, which is fully paid for and can be found at janeforgovernor.com. It's going to eliminate the state income tax for 95% of Marylanders without cutting services. It's going to make public transit completely free and more available for every resident. It's going to make sure we have the nation's first guaranteed jobs program, where the state government will be the employer of last resort if you are struggling to find work or being discriminated in the labor force, whether you are trans, whether you are a veteran, whether you're a new mother, whether you are someone who is an undocumented immigrant. Regardless of where you are, we have to make sure that you have access to good jobs and a reduced cost of living. Again, not just in the short term, but the long term as well.
Mr. King.
Look, sadly, extending the gas tax holiday is really a gimmick. It doesn't help us achieve independence from despots with oil fields. Our inability so far to take on the climate crisis seriously in Maryland is a reflection of where our insider politics are stuck. You know, I think about a young woman named Katie, who I met at an event in Easton, who literally broke into tears describing her fear that her home will be underwater if we don't take action on climate. We need a governor who will lead on climate, who will commit us to get to net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2035, who will build 10,000 charging stations so we can move over to electric vehicles, who will have a transportation strategy that is people-centered, not car-centered, invest in public transportation, invest in protected bike lanes, walkable communities. Ultimately, we need to act like climate change is the existential threat that it is. That's what I will do as governor.
County Executive Baker.
You know, as a county executive, I'm one who's faced these type of issues where you could look at short-term solutions versus long-term. I think short-term, yes, we should give tax relief on gas to the citizens. But we need to invest in the long term. Mr. King is absolutely right. We have to invest in electric vehicles. We also have to invest more in our transit to help out, but we also have to expand our commercial tax base. That's how long term we're going to prepare ourselves for this. So in the short term, yes, we want to give some relief because it's disproportionately falling on people who don't have the means to do it. This is not a tax that affects just the rich. This falls disproportionately on those who can least afford it. So we should provide them with some level of relief right now. But the long term for those federal dollars should be invested in things that we've just talked about, whether it's mass transit, whether it is renewable energy, and also making sure that we provide options for citizens. So that is what I would do as governor. I would lead that way.
Peter Franchot.
Yes, the gas tax is the most regressive tax that we have in the state. And it affects exactly the people that County Executive Baker just mentioned. So yeah, it was my idea on March 10th, why don't we have a gas tax holiday? 8 days later, it was enacted into law. It was very popular, very successful. Almost big chunks of it were paid for by out-of-state people looking for cheap gas. Pennsylvania, Virginia, DC. Like me, if I see across the street a gas station that's selling gas for a couple of pennies less than the one I normally go to, I go to the one across the street. They did. They came in and they bought cheap gas, but they also bought taxable items. So actually, it kind of offset it. This type of temporary tax break to our citizens is essential. We need to give them some relief. Short term, we can afford it fiscally, and I'm a big fan of doing programs like this as long as they're temporary. Thank you.
Mr. Gansler.
Yes, we need to give relief on the gas tax. In fact, we shouldn't be raising any taxes. It's regressive, and working families and folks at home need help from the tax rates that we have here in Maryland. When I was president of all the attorneys general of the United States, we had the national mortgage foreclosure crisis. I got almost $2 billion into Maryland to keep people away from being foreclosed upon by the big banks. It's that kind of attitude that we need of getting things done and going forward. In terms of the gas tax, we do have that surplus. We do have the infrastructure bill. We need to, instead of putting more money in gas tax, in cars, we need to have mass transit. When Governor Hogan canceled the Red Line, it was like taking a sledgehammer to the people of Baltimore. We need to make sure the Purple Line gets built, the Southern Maryland Light Rail from Branch Avenue into Charles County, the Wilson Bridge Metro for which it was built. The Metro needs to go over the Wilson Bridge, and we need to have light rail from Shady Grove to Frederick. we need to also create the infrastructure for electric vehicles that are coming, but people aren't going to buy them if we don't have the infrastructure available.
Mr. Moore, under the rules here, you would have a minute, and then we would talk to Mr. Barron, and then you would get rebuttal time. Your choice whether to do it all at once.
No, I'll do the minute now, and then I'll come back if that's okay. You know, because I want to focus on this issue, because I'm hearing it everywhere I go around the state, where people are saying that everything feels more expensive because it is. And I hear you. From gas prices to the cost of prescription drugs to food. And so we have to use our powers to be able to give a temporary pressure valve release for our citizens. But it is also about the fact that we have to address the long-term challenges like transportation, and you will see that in the Moore-Miller administration, we will initiate and prioritize things like getting the red line done, because as I mentioned before, I think it was incomprehensible that that was canceled. And at the same time, we have to get our economy back going. We have to get ourselves to a $15 minimum wage and faster than 2025. We have to ensure that we can fix a broken child care system, because right now, since COVID, we've had over 850 child care centers close. And we have to focus on job retraining and job reskilling to get people back into the workforce.
Next answer, Mr. Barron.
I support a temporary delay in the gas tax increase until gas prices stabilize. But the biggest economic problem in our state, by far, the 800-pound gorilla, is the fact that for the bottom 40% of Maryland households, they have seen stagnant incomes since the 1980s, while income inequality has exploded. The American narrative of optimism and progress, that no longer holds true for nearly half of our people. Addressing this will be my top priority as governor. In my first 100 days, I will launch a statewide partnership with Maryland businesses to provide effective job training to every adult in the state who wants to advance. If it's done right, job training has been shown to increase earnings as much as 40%, but the key is to focus that training on fast-growing industries, number one, and second, to work hand-in-hand with employers who provide paid internships to the trainees. Under my plan, the state will pay for the training, the employers pay for the internships, our economy gets skilled workers, everyone benefits.
Mr. Moore, you have 45 seconds of rebuttal time.
Thanks so much. And Tom mentions that he's part of the GSD wing of the party, but here's what GSD means when it comes to him going against the big banks. Because as he went against the big banks, do you know how many Wall Street executives actually went to jail and were prosecuted under his watch? The answer is 0. That's not GSD. That's not getting stuff done. The other thing that we know is this, is while he was the head of the DNC, he received a vote of no confidence from the Congressional Black Caucus. The Congressional Black Caucus tried to ouster him as the head of the DNC. And so the truth is, Tom, when we talk about things like what it means to hold people accountable and what it means to fight for the little guy is the one who's actually been oppressed by you. And so now when you're coming and asking the black community for their support, we're looking back at you and saying, where was your support when we needed it?
Tom Perez, you're owed 45 seconds. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Okay. You know, when I got to be DNC chair, we didn't have the White House, we didn't have the Senate, we didn't have the House. Now we have the White House, the Senate, and the House. One of my strongest supporters in this campaign is my good friend Keith Ellison, former member of the Congressional Black Caucus. We did some tough reforms, and we had some folks who didn't agree to them, but you know what? We made people have the ability to exercise their right to vote. We expanded things, and that's how we won. That's how we won elections. I wasn't involved in criminal prosecutions of Wall Street bankers. That was a different place. And I agree with you. There should have been more criminal prosecutions. But you know what? I settled the 2 largest fair lending cases in the history of the Fair Housing Act, one of which was right here in the city of Baltimore for Baltimore black and brown residents. Because you know what? During their toughest time, I was there for them. You can't say I'm leaving no one behind when the reality is a lot of black and brown Baltimoreans were left behind during the foreclosure crisis.
Mr. Perez, thank you. We have time for some individual questions asked by our panel. Alexis, your turn.
Right. My first question is for you, Mr. Franchot. In the past 2 years, calls to mental health hotlines have more than doubled. Marylanders are in need of serious mental health supports. I know several of you have talked about your own personal experiences with mental health and that of your close family members. I would like to know, what specific health initiatives do you plan to implement or expand in your first 100 days in office?
Well, I talked about affordability. Great question, because it's a huge problem, particularly in the education sector, where, as you noted, there's so much pressure from substitute teachers not coming in, the support staff isn't showing up. COVID has had a major, exhausting, frustrating impact upon your sector, but also the healthcare sector. My plan is to dramatically expand the number of community clinics, federally qualified healthcare clinics throughout the state, so that nobody's more than a 15-minute walk in an urban area or a 15-minute drive in a rural area from getting affordable health care, but also mental health counseling. Because obviously it's front and center. And you know, we all have our stories about the impact of COVID. It's still not properly measured or dealt with. But I think at a minimum, increasing the access to community clinics is something that will really help this issue down the road. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. Deborah Weiner.
Mr. Baker, you have called for a state of emergency in Baltimore City. Do you also support bringing in the National Guard?
You know, I have called for a state of emergency in Baltimore City, and what that means is that at the governor level, it opens up all your tools that you can use. So we should actually be using, we don't need the National Guard to come in, but we do need to have our Maryland State Police come in and patrol the downtown areas in Baltimore City, also do the traffic stops, and free up our Baltimore City Police to go into the neighborhoods. But what it will also bring is access to health care. So we get mental and behavioral health, more dollars into the city. It will be working with the governor's office, the Attorney General's office, and the state attorney's office in Baltimore City. So it's using all the powers that the governor has to bring it in. And that's where I think we can actually have help in reducing the crime there. And also parole and probation, so that we can actually get a hold of that in Baltimore City, which is a state function. And so I want to use all the tools and be a partner for the city.
Mr. Baker, thank you. C4, last question.
This is for former Secretary of Education John King. We have a state test, the Maryland Comprehensive Assessment Program, MCAP. This thing has been thrown so many names. I remember it was MISPAP, and somebody gets paid just to change the names of these tests. Park. Anyway, this test has shown that through the COVID slide, as many people have called it, our students have fallen far behind in Maryland because of virtual education. What do you think we need to do, particularly with the achievement gap being widened between minority students and others? How do we help to deal with that gap, that missing educational time?
You'll just have 45 seconds.
Right. Look, I lived the impact of COVID, having two kids in Montgomery County schools who spent a year virtually. It was incredibly difficult. We have tremendous privilege, but it was really hard academically, hard socio-emotionally, and we're seeing that in schools all across the state. There are at least three things we need to do. One, I've called for mobilizing a statewide tutoring corps. Recent college graduates, retired teachers, to work with students one-on-one, two-on-one, to help make up the academic ground.
Mr. King, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there for timing, but everybody can visit all the candidates' websites for more information. We thank you for being here. Thanks to the reporters. Thank you for watching, and have a good night.